The question always comes first, spoken with curiosity and disbelief. Who were these men, and what exactly did they do? Were they real soldiers, or something else entirely? The answer unsettles people because it refuses to fit neatly into traditional ideas of warfare. They were absolutely real troops, fully trained, fully deployed, and fully at risk, yet their greatest weapon was not firepower. It was illusion. They were the first organized military unit in American history to operate across the full spectrum of deception. Not just camouflage, not just fake equipment. They combined sight, sound, signal, and psychology into a single, coordinated machine. No army before them had attempted deception at this scale. Few have dared to repeat it since. Long after the war, fragments of their work would be briefed to modern intelligence professionals. Officers at the National Ground Intelligence Center would study their operations, not as history, but as doctrine. The reason was simple. Nobody had ever done it like this. And nobody, even decades later, had matched the audacity. They called themselves the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, though that name would remain classified for decades. To the enemy, they were divisions that existed only on maps. 2 Allied commanders. They were a tool of last resort, used when no conventional option would suffice. To the men themselves, they were soldiers living inside a lie so elaborate it could get them killed if they made a single mistake. Their deception rested on 4 pillars, each useless on its own, devastating when combined. Visual tricks were the most popular, with sound tricks right behind, and radio tricks tying it all together. And finally, special effects. Human elements sold the lie to anyone who got too close. Most people know the rubber tanks, inflatable Shermans and trucks that could be packed into a Jeep and inflated in minutes. But a tank that does not move, does not sound, does not communicate, convinces no one. The Ghost Army understood this instinctively. Deception was not about objects. It was about behavior. The visual deception began at Fort Beaver, Virginia, on what is now North Post. Artists, engineers, and designers worked together to create inflatable dummies with the correct proportions, silhouettes, and surface details. These were not toys. From the air, from a distance, under combat conditions, they looked real enough to fool experienced aerial reconnaissance pilots. Some of the creations bordered on the absurd. One of the most remarkable was an entire L-5 spotter aircraft constructed from balloons. It looked fragile, ridiculous even, until you understood the thinking behind it. You could not simply place a fake airplane in a field. An airplane required an airstrip. That airstrip had to look viable. It had to sit on ground firm enough to support landings. Everything had to make sense. So the Ghost Army built airstrips where none existed. They cleared land, flattened terrain, and positioned decoy aircraft exactly where real ones would park. And because the deception was classified, Allied pilots sometimes had no idea real aircraft would land, taxi, and stop next to balloon planes. When that happened, Ghost Army troops sprinted out, waving frantically, shouting for pilots to move before someone realized what they were parked beside. Camouflage was never perfect by design. Some equipment was hidden well. Other pieces were deliberately imperfect. A corner exposed a contour BC, just enough for an observer kept at a distance by security patrols to see something and believe it was real. A half-track here, a cluster of trucks there. It was not just about what was visible, but how it was placed. Early dummy tanks were pretty basic, but artists got creative, adding shadows, highlights, stenciled designs, and even some fake dirt and wear. Over time, the illusions improved. During Operation Viarzen, one of the Ghost Army's most important missions, entire landscapes were transformed. Muddy fields were carved with tank tracks that led logically to parked vehicles and stopped where they should. Tracks mattered. Vehicles left clues behind. Evidence had to be consistent. Every detail told a story. Everything except the buildings in some of those photographs was fake, but sight alone was never enough. Tanks made noise. Troops made noise. Armies were loud, so the Ghost Army brought sound. Sonic deception in 1944 pushed the limits of technology. The amplifiers they used would not be surpassed in power until the Beatles played Shea Stadium in 1961. Rows of massive speakers each one, originally designed for aircraft carrier decks, were mounted on trucks. These systems could project the sound of an armored division miles across the countryside. Engines revving. Tracks clanking. Men shouting. Picture this. Entire armies brought to life with just wire and steel. Isn't that wild? The sound was not random. It was calibrated. Engineers adjusted for humidity, terrain, and distance so that what German listeners heard felt real. Not recorded, not artificial. Just distant enough to be believable. This required precision science. At MIT, a young physicist named Leo Baranik was asked to solve a problem no one had faced before. How do you isolate sound completely, with no echo, no distortion? His solution became the world's first anechoic chamber, a technology now standard in recording studios. It was invented not for music, but for war. The Ghost Army recorded sounds onto wire, recorders thin steel, wire wound into spools. 30 minutes per reel. They layered tracks, multiplexed them, and even learned how to defeat the Doppler effect so sounds did not betray their artificial origin. This was innovation born of necessity, not theory. Then came radio deception. An army did not just move, it talked. Radios buzzed constantly with logistics, complaints, orders, and chaos. To fake an army, you had to fake its voice. The Ghost Army possessed a full complement of divisional radios, from low-power sets to high-level command equipment. They even had encryption machines, rarely issued outside naval units. Among them was the Sagaba cipher, used to generate the radio signature German listening stations expected from high-level units. The messages themselves were nonsense, but the signal was right. To enemy intelligence, it sounded authentic. The Ghost Army did not improvise. Every transmission was scripted. As real units moved, they shut down their radios at precise control points. The Ghost Army took over seamlessly, continuing the chatter as if nothing had changed. Requests for supplies, complaints about delays, mentions of promotions and missing officers. Human noise layered into technical signal. Some of the radio operators were musicians. They could mimic another man's Morse code fist, the subtle rhythm that intelligence analysts believed was impossible to fake. Yet they did it routinely. They listened, learned, and replaced operators so cleanly that German analysts never noticed the switch. The final pillar was special effects. The soldiers themselves became props. They repainted bumper markings on abandoned vehicles, knowing German agents cataloged unit insignia. Today, the Jeep belonged to the 90th Infantry Division. Next week, the 79th. They carried the right uniforms, tank jackets for armor divisions, infantry gear for foot soldiers. They even manufactured their own shoulder, pache over 40,000 of them. This was why soldiers were ordered to tear off their real patches. Not for security alone, but because someone else would wear them soon. They impersonated officers. A young captain might become a colonel overnight. Fake command posts were constructed with excessive wiring to suggest heavy communications traffic. Senior officers walked in, saluted, and never questioned how a man so young could hold such rank. They grumbled to first sergeants instead. They staged drunken conversations in bars, spoke too loudly, let slip secrets that were meant to be overheard. Everything rehearsed, everything controlled. They conducted 21 major deception operations in Europe, possibly more. Some activities remained obscured, buried in classified language. A few soldiers even crossed behind enemy lines into occupied Paris without orders, and returned without punishment on a mission that suggests approval no one ever wrote down. They landed on Omaha and Utah beaches on D-Day, 6 hours after a hour. All 4 men were wounded that day not by the enemy, but by Allied fire. The Ghost Army learned early that illusion did not protect you from shrapnel. They were present at the breakout from Normandy, Operation Cobra. They were nearly overrun during the Battle of the Bulge, ordered to evacuate or destroy their equipment if capture became imminent. German troops came within 400 yards of their command post. They crossed France endlessly. From June 1944 to May 1945, the average vehicle logged 22,000 miles. There was no rear area for the Ghost Army, only movement. And then came the moment that proved what deception could do.